I'm Sabrina, 29 female. I'm a graphic designer, happily married to my husband, Ryan, and for the last 8.5 months, my entire world has revolved around a single, joyous project: preparing for the arrival of our first child, a son we decided to name Leo. My life was a canvas of soft blues, gentle yellows, and the quiet hum of anticipation. But in the span of a single weekend, that canvas was violently slashed, and the quiet hum was replaced by the deafening silence of betrayal. This is the story of how my sister's pathological jealousy led her to destroy the sanctuary I built for my unborn son, and how the calm, unyielding force of my father-in-law, a retired Marine general, ensured she faced a justice I never could have imagined. Before this story unfolds, I'd love to connect with you. Please let me know in the comments where you're watching from and what time it is in your corner of the world. It's amazing to see how far these stories can travel. The final weeks of my pregnancy were a blur of nesting and happy exhaustion. Ryan and I had bought our first home 2 years prior, a modest but charming 2-story house in a quiet suburban neighborhood. It was the perfect place to start a family, and we'd spent every spare moment turning the second bedroom into a nursery. It wasn't just a room to me, it was a promise. A promise of love, safety, and all the wonderful things we wanted for our son. As a graphic designer, my creativity is usually confined to a screen, but for the nursery, I let it spill into the real world. I spent weeks painting a mural across one entire wall, a whimsical scene of friendly forest animals under a canopy of soft, leafy trees. A gentle bear, a curious fox, and a family of owls all watched over the spot where the crib would go. It was my masterpiece. Ryan, a civil engineer who thinks in straight lines and solid foundations, contributed his own brand of love. He assembled the crib, a beautiful piece of oak furniture gifted by his parents, with the meticulous precision he'd normally reserve for a bridge schematic. He installed dimmer switches so the light would always be soft, and blackout curtains to ensure deep, peaceful sleep. We hung a mobile I'd found on Etsy, made of felted stars and a smiling crescent moon. Every piece of clothing was washed in gentle, lavender-scented soap and folded neatly in the dresser drawers. The room smelled of fresh paint, new wood, and pure, unadulterated hope. It was perfect. Our joy was shared, for the most part, by our families. Ryan's parents were over the moon. His mother was already knitting a mountain of tiny hats and booties, while his father, General Thomas Hayes, was uncharacteristically tender. The general was a man carved from granite and discipline. He had served 35 years in the Marine Corps, and his presence still commanded an entire room. But when he spoke of his coming grandchild, his voice would soften, and he'd place a gentle, surprisingly soft hand on my belly and ask, "How's my little soldier doing in there?" His approval meant the world to me. He and Ryan's mom saw me as the daughter they'd never had, and their steady, unwavering support was the bedrock of my new family. My own family was more complicated. My father is a decent man but terminally non-confrontational, and my mother, Helen, has always operated under the principle that the squeakiest wheel gets the grease. In our family, the squeakiest wheel was, and always had been, my younger sister, Chloe. At 24, Chloe was 5 years my junior, but emotionally she was stuck in her teens. She was beautiful, charismatic, and profoundly selfish. Her entire life had been a series of tantrums and manipulations that our mother rewarded with placating gestures and open-ended financial support. While I had worked my way through college and built a career, Chloe had flitted from one passion to the next: acting, photography, and now, her most enduring venture, being an aspiring influencer. This mostly involved taking glamorous photos in expensive outfits, funded by our parents, and complaining that her follower count wasn't growing fast enough. My pregnancy had, to put it mildly, not been well received by Chloe. It was a 9-month-long event that shifted the family's attention squarely onto me, and she couldn't stand it. At my baby shower, she'd made a passive-aggressive toast about how some people just settle down while others are destined for bigger things. When my mother gushed about the nursery mural, Chloe scoffed and said, "I mean, it's cute if you're into that whole domestic thing." She saw my quiet, happy life with Ryan not as something I had built, but as a personal insult to her own stalled ambitions. The jealousy was a toxic energy that radiated from her, and I did my best to keep my distance, for my own sanity and the well-being of my baby. The tension came to a head about a month before my due date. Chloe called me in a panic, demanding I end her $2,000. She needed it for a last-minute influencer retreat in Bali, which she was convinced would be her big break. I calmly told her no. Ryan and I were saving every penny for the baby and the unpaid weeks of my maternity leave. It wasn't just that I couldn't afford it, it was the principle of the thing. I was done financing her fantasies. Her reaction was explosive. "Of course not," she screamed through the phone. "You can't spare anything for your own sister, not when you're busy buying $1,000 strollers and playing house. You've always been selfish, Sabrina. You have everything: the perfect husband, the perfect house, and now the perfect baby to get everyone's attention. What do I have?" I tried to reason with her, but it was like arguing with a hurricane. She ended the call by screaming, "You'll regret this," before hanging up. I was shaken, but I chalked it up to typical Chloe drama. I told Ryan about it, and he just wrapped his arms around me and said, "That's her problem, not yours. We have more important things to focus on." He was right. We had a baby coming. The nursery was finished, the hospital bag was packed, and all that was left to do was wait. In that peaceful, hopeful space, I truly believed that nothing could touch us. The walls I had so carefully painted felt like a fortress, and I was safe inside with my loving husband and my unborn son. I had no idea that the real threat wasn't outside those walls, but within my own family, waiting for the perfect moment to strike. I had underestimated the depths of her resentment, and I had no idea that her parting threat was not just the empty drama I was used to, but a chilling promise of what was to come. With just 3 weeks to go before my due date, my doctor advised me to start taking it easy. "No more climbing ladders to paint murals," she'd said with a smile. Ryan took her words to heart. He declared that we were going on one last baby moon before Leo's arrival. It wasn't anything extravagant, just a 2-night stay at a cozy bed and breakfast in the mountains, about a 3-hour drive away. It was a chance to unplug, to be just Sabrina and Ryan one last time before we became mom and dad. My mother and father-in-law were both enthusiastic, urging us to go and relax. "We'll be here if you need anything," my mother-in-law promised. Even my own mother, Helen, seemed supportive, telling me I deserved a break. We left on a Friday morning, the house locked up tight. We had a doorbell camera and a single camera in the downstairs living room, more for checking on our cat than for serious security. The only person we trusted with a spare key was our neighbor, a kind retiree named Mrs. Gable, who had agreed to pop in and feed the cat while we were away. I explicitly told my mother that Mrs. Gable had the key and would be handling everything, a detail I thought was insignificant at the time. I'd learned long ago not to give my mother a spare key. It had a mysterious way of ending up in Chloe's hands for her to borrow my clothes or makeup without asking. This time, I was certain I had created a foolproof system. The first day and a half were idyllic. We hiked a gentle trail, ate at a charming local diner, and spent hours just reading by the fireplace in our room. My phone was mostly off, tucked away in my purse. The peace was absolute. It was shattered on Saturday afternoon when I briefly turned my phone on to check messages. There was a string of angry texts from Chloe, followed by 2 missed calls. I sighed, my bubble of tranquility instantly popped. I knew I shouldn't, but I called her back. "Finally," she snapped without so much as a hello. "I need to get into your house. I need to borrow your Canon." She was referring to my professional-grade DSLR camera and lenses, my primary tools for freelance work. It was thousands of dollars worth of equipment that I guarded with my life. "Chloe, I'm not home," I said, trying to keep my voice even. "We're out of town, remember? And besides, I need that for work. I can't lend it out." "I don't care if you're not home," she retorted, her voice rising with that familiar, petulant tone. "I have a shoot tomorrow with another influencer. It's a huge opportunity, and my phone camera isn't good enough. You're not even using your camera, you're on vacation. It's just sitting there." "The answer is no," I said firmly. "The house is locked up, and nobody is going in there besides Mrs. Gable to feed the cat. We can talk about this when I get back. Her fury was palpable, even through the phone. You are unbelievable. You are so incredibly selfish. I ask for one little thing, one thing to help my career, and you shut me down. You just want to see me fail? I bet you love it, sitting there in your perfect little life with your perfect little husband looking down on me. The tirade continued, a torrent of accusations and insults that had become her standard script. It ended the same wah. Wyatt had a few weeks before. You will regret this, Sabrina, I swear you will, she shrieked, and the line went dead. I hung up, my hands trembling. Ryan saw the look on my face and immediately came over, taking the phone from my hand. Let me guess. Chloe, I nodded, tears welling in my eyes. Why can't she just be happy for me? Why does everything have to be a fight? He held me close, his presence a warm, solid comfort. Because her world is all about her, he said softly. Don't let her ruin this. Turn your phone off. We have one more night. Let's enjoy it. I agreed, and for the next several hours, I managed to push her out of my mind. We had a lovely dinner, and I fell asleep listening to the sound of the wind in the pine trees outside our window, convinced that the drama was over. What I didn't know was that the real drama had just begun. Back home, Chloe had moved on to her next target. Having failed with me, she called our mother. I pieced this part of the story together later, through my mother's tearful, shame-faced confession. Chloe had spun a masterful web of lies. She told Helen that she and I had talked, and that I'd said it was fine for her to borrow the camera. Sabrina said she forgot to leave me a key, Chloe had lied, her voice dripping with faux sweetness. She said you have that other spare one in your jewelry box and that you should let me in. She's worried I'll miss my big shoot. My mother, who so desperately wanted to believe in a world where her daughters got along, fell for it hook, line, and sinker. The spare key in the jewelry box was one I had given her years ago for emergencies only, one I had foolishly forgotten to ask for back. Believing she was being a helpful mother and grandmother-to-be, Helen drove over to our house, unlocked the front door, and let the fox into the henhouse. She disarmed the downstairs alarm system. She knew the code, another mistake on my part, and left Chloe alone in my home, trusting her to simply grab the camera and leave. My mother's betrayal wasn't malicious, but born of a willful blindness and a desperate need to appease her volatile younger daughter. It was a betrayal of trust so profound that it would ultimately shatter our family. While I slept peacefully in the mountains, dreaming of my son, my sister was in his room with a can of spray paint and a heart full of poison. We drove home on Sunday afternoon, feeling refreshed and reconnected. We talked about Leo, making silly bets on whether he'd have my eyes or Ryan's smile. I felt a deep sense of calm, the mountain air having seemingly cleared my head of Chloe's toxicity. As we pulled into our driveway, everything looked exactly as we'd left it. The lawn was neat, the windows were dark, and there was no sign of anything amiss. Ryan carried our bags inside while I went to the kitchen to greet our cat, who rubbed against my legs, purring loudly. Mrs. Gable had left a sweet note on the counter, saying everything had gone perfectly. I smiled, feeling a wave of gratitude for our quiet, orderly life. After putting some things away, I felt an instinctive pull to go upstairs. I wanted to see the nursery. Throughout my pregnancy, it had become my sanctuary, the place I would go to feel close to my son. I'd often just sit in the rocking chair, my hands on my belly, imagining what it would be like to hold him in my arms in that very room. Ryan was still downstairs, so I walked up alone, my mind filled with peaceful thoughts. I pushed the nursery door open and stopped dead in my tracks. The first thing that hit me was the smell. A sharp chemical odor that burned my nostrils. It was the smell of spray paint, thick and overwhelming. My eyes struggled to make sense of what they were seeing. The serene, whimsical forest I had so lovingly painted on the wall was gone. In its place, scrawled in jagged, furious black letters, were the words, "Attention whore and selfish brat." My beautiful mural, my masterpiece, was defaced, violated. My breath caught in my throat, a choked, painful gasp. My gaze moved frantically around the room, each new detail a fresh stab to the heart. The beautiful oak crib, the one Ryan had assembled with such care, was in pieces. The mattress had been slashed repeatedly, its stuffing pulled out in great, white clumps. The custom-made mobile of stars and moons lay shattered on the floor, its delicate felt shapes torn and stomped on. Tiny clothes, gifts from our baby shower, had been ripped from the dresser drawers and were strewn across the room, some torn, others stained with what looked like spilled soda. The glider chair where I'd dreamed of nursing my son was overturned, one of its wooden rockers snapped in two. Every promise the room held had been broken. Every ounce of love I had poured into it had been met with an equal measure of hate. For a moment, I couldn't move. I couldn't breathe. My mind simply refused to process the scene of absolute devastation. This wasn't just vandalism, this was a desecration. It was a targeted, personal attack on the most vulnerable part of my life, my child. A low, keening sound escaped my lips, a sound I didn't recognize as my own. My legs gave out, and I crumpled to the floor in the doorway, my body racked with deep, gut-wrenching sobs. The grief was so immense, so physical, it felt like I was being torn apart from the inside. "Sabrina," Ryan's voice called from the bottom of the stairs. "Honey, is everything okay?" He heard my cries and took the stairs two at a time. He appeared at the doorway and his cheerful expression vanished, replaced by one of pure horror. What happened?" he whispered, his eyes wide with disbelief as he took in the wreckage. He saw me on the floor, and in two long strides he was by my side, wrapping his arms around me. He held me tight against his chest as I wept, his own body trembling with a mixture of shock and rage. "Who did this?" he said, his voice low and dangerous. And in that moment we both knew. There was only one person capable of such targeted, venomous cruelty. "Chloe," I sobbed into his shirt. It had to be Chloe. Ryan's grief quickly hardened into cold fury. He gently helped me to my feet, his face a mask of grim determination. "Stay here," he commanded, leading me back into our bedroom and sitting me on the bed. "Don't go back in there. Don't touch anything. I'm calling the police." I watched numb as he pulled out his phone and dialed 911. His voice was steady and clear as he reported the break-in and vandalism, but I could see the muscle jumping in his jaw. The man who could solve any problem with logic and a blueprint was now faced with an act of pure, irrational hatred, and his entire being was focused on one thing: justice. 2 officers arrived within 20 minutes. They were professional and sympathetic, their faces grim as they surveyed the damage in the nursery. They asked the usual questions. Were there signs of forced entry? Was anything stolen? We told them no, which immediately led to the next question: who else had a key? My heart sank as I explained the arrangement with Mrs. Gable, and the officers went to speak with her. She was distraught, insisting she had locked the door every time she'd left. They then asked if anyone else might have a grudge against us. Ryan and I looked at each other, and with a heavy heart, I told them about my sister. I told them about our fight, about her demand for the camera, about her parting threat. They took notes, dusted for fingerprints around the room, and took photos of the devastation. As one of the officers was finishing up, he pointed to the defaced wall. "This wasn't random," he said quietly. "This was personal, vicious." I just nodded, fresh tears streaming down my face. When they left, they gave us a case number and promised to follow up. The house fell silent again, but the peace was gone, replaced by the lingering stench of spray paint and the haunting image of my son's ruined sanctuary. Ryan wrapped a blanket around my shoulders and held me close, but for the first time in our perfect house, I felt utterly and completely unsafe. The hours after the police left were a strange, surreal limbo. The nursery door was closed, but it was like a gaping wound in our home. We couldn't bring ourselves to look at it again, but we couldn't ignore it either. The violation was too profound. I felt a paralyzing mix of grief and rage, but beneath it all was a terrifying fear. My sister had done this. My own flesh and blood had entered my home with the intent to cause as much pain as possible. If she was capable of this, what else was she capable of? The thought sent a chill through me, and I instinctively wrapped my arms around my belly, a primal urge to protect my son from a world that suddenly felt much more dangerous. Ryan, on the other hand, had moved past grief and into action. His engineering mind kicked into gear, treating the situation like a structural failure that needed to be analyzed and rectified. "The police will do their job," he said, his voice tight, "but we're not just going to sit here. We're going to build an ironclad case. He remembered our security cameras. While the indoor one was only focused on the living room, the doorbell camera covered our entire front porch and driveway. He opened the app on his laptop, and we sat together on the sofa, scrolling back through the weekend's footage. And there it was, Saturday, 4:15 p.m. The timestamp was a dagger to my heart. It was right after I had spoken to Chloe on the phone. The video showed my mother's car pulling into our driveway. My mother, Helen, got out, walked to our front door, and unlocked it. A moment later, Chloe emerged from the passenger seat. She was wearing sunglasses and a hoodie, but it was unmistakably her. She marched past my mother and into the house with a look of thunderous rage on her face. My mother hesitated for a second, then got back in her car and drove away, leaving Chloe alone in our home. 45 minutes later, the camera captured Chloe striding out of the house, slamming the door behind her. She looked smug, her anger replaced with a chilling sense of satisfaction. She got into her own car, which had been parked down the street, and sped away. The video was a smoking gun. It proved Chloe was there, and it implicated our mother as an accessory. A fresh wave of betrayal washed over me. "She let her in," I whispered, my voice breaking. "She lied to me. She said she was being supportive, telling me to go and relax and all along." Ryan squeezed my hand, his knuckles white. "I know," he said, his voice dangerously low. "We'll deal with her later. First, Chloe." He saved the video files, backing them up to 3 separate cloud services. Then he picked up his phone. I knew who he was calling. Not the police, not yet. He was calling his father. I listened as Ryan calmly and methodically explained everything that had happened to General Hayes. He laid out the facts without emotion. The baby moon, the fight with Chloe, the discovery of the nursery, the police report, and Fina. Ellie, the video evidence. I could hear the general's voice on the other end, calm and measured, asking short, precise questions. What was the estimated value of the damages? Did the officers give you a copy of their report? Have you sent me the video files yet? There was no shock or outrage in his voice, only a focused intensity, like a commander assessing a battlefield. After a few minutes of silence, the general spoke with chilling clarity. "Son, you and Sabrina are not to contact her. Do not speak to your mother, either. Forward me the contact information for the lead detective on your case. I will be at your house at 800 tomorrow. We are going to handle this." The call ended, and a strange sense of calm settled over me. The general was in control. While my own family had either attacked me or enabled the attack, my husband's family was closing ranks, building a fortress of support around us. The next step was the hardest. We had to confront my mother. Ryan insisted we do it together. I called her, my hands shaking. The moment she heard my voice, she knew something was wrong. "Sabrina, what is it? Is the baby okay?" "Why did you give Chloe a key to our house, Mom?" I asked, my voice flat and devoid of emotion. The silence on the other end was heavy with guilt. Then came the flood of excuses. "Oh, honey," she called me. She was so upset. She said you two had talked and you'd given her permission to borrow your camera for a big photo shoot. I thought I was helping. I had no idea." "You knew I didn't give you a key for a reason, Mom." I cut her off. "You knew how she's been acting. You went behind my back and you let her into my home. You need to tell me what she said when she came out." My mother started sobbing. "She seemed happy," she admitted between sobs. "She said she got what she needed and that you two were fine now. I wanted to believe her, Sabrina. I just want my girls to get along." "Did you go inside?" Ryan asked, his voice sharp. "No," she whimpered. "She said she was in a hurry." "Well, Mom," I said, the coldness in my voice surprising even me. "While you were trying to make things fine, Chloe was destroying your grandchild's nursery. She slashed the crib, she broke the furniture, and she spray-painted hateful things all over the mural I spent a month painting." The sobs on the other end turned into horrified gasps. "We have her on camera, Mom. We have you on camera letting her in. The police have been here. A detective will be calling you." I hung up before she could respond, the sound of her wailing echoing in my ear. It was a cruel thing to do, but I was past the point of caring about her feelings. Her desire to keep the peace had enabled a level of destruction I could barely comprehend. The investigation wasn't just about the police anymore. It was about uncovering the complete and total betrayal at the heart of my own family. The next morning at precisely 8:00 a.m., a black SUV pulled into our driveway. General Thomas Hayes stepped out, dressed not in uniform, but in a sharply pressed polo shirt and slacks. Yet he carried with him an aura of authority that no uniform could enhance. He wasn't there as a grandfather-to-be, offering emotional comfort. He was there as a strategist, ready to direct a campaign. He greeted us with a firm nod and a brief, comforting squeeze on my shoulder. "Let's see the damage," he said, his voice calm and steady. He walked with us to the nursery, his face unreadable. He stood in the doorway for a full minute, his sharp eyes scanning every detail of the wreckage. He surveyed the slashed mattress, the broken chair, the shattered mobile, and the venomous words scrawled across my mural. I expected him to show anger or disgust, but his expression remained a stoic mask. He was assessing, analyzing, quantifying. When he finally turned to us, his eyes were like chips of ice. "This was not an act of anger," he stated, his voice low. "This was an act of psychological warfare. The objective was to terrorize and demoralize." He pulled out a small, leather-bound notebook and a pen. "We need to document everything for the prosecution," he said. "Ryan, I want you to create a spreadsheet. Itemize every single damaged object. Find the original receipts or online listings. We need an exact monetary value. Sabrina, I know this is difficult, but I need you to write a victim impact statement. Describe the work you put into this room. Describe what it meant to you. Describe the emotional distress this has caused. Be detailed, be honest." He was giving us our marching orders, and in our state of shock and grief, the clear, actionable directives were a lifeline. We spent the next hour in the living room, our makeshift command center. The general had already been on the phone. "I've spoken with an old friend who is now a supervising agent at the local FBI field office," he explained, as if this were the most normal thing in the world. "I've also reached out to the U.S. Attorney's Office. Given that Ryan's work on federal infrastructure projects requires him to have a security clearance, a targeted attack on his home, especially one this premeditated and destructive, can be viewed through a more serious lens than simple sibling rivalry." I was stunned. The U.S. Attorney, the FBI, "I thought this was just a local police matter," I said, my voice barely a whisper. The general looked at me, his gaze direct but not unkind. "Local DAs are overworked. They might see this as a family squabble and offer her a lenient plea deal, probation, anger management, restitution. That is an unacceptable outcome. An act of this magnitude requires a consequence of equal magnitude. We are not seeking revenge, Sabrina. We are seeking justice. The kind of justice that prevents this from ever happening again." He explained that while the crime itself was local, his connections could ensure the case was reviewed by federal prosecutors, who have more resources and less tolerance for such calculated acts of destruction. He wasn't fabricating a federal case, but rather ensuring that the existing criminal codes were applied with maximum force. The plan he laid out was simple in its execution, but brilliant in its strategy. It was a plan of absolute non-engagement and overwhelming evidence. "First," he declared, "you will cut off all contact with Chloe and your mother, block their numbers, their social media, everything. They will try to guilt you, manipulate you, and force you into a family mediation. You will not allow it. This is no longer a family matter. It is a criminal proceeding." He then told us he had hired a lawyer for us. Not a criminal lawyer, but a victims' rights attorney who would act as our liaison with the police and the prosecutor's office, ensuring our voices were heard and our interests were protected throughout the process. "Second," he continued, "we turn this house back into a home." He had already arranged for a professional crime scene cleaning crew to come that afternoon to safely remove the damaged items and clean the air of the chemical fumes. He had also contacted a contractor who would be there the next day to repair the walls, replace the flooring if needed, and repaint the room. "Everything will be photographed before, during, and after," he assured us. "The contractor's bill will be part of the restitution claim." His methodical approach was incredibly calming. He was taking the chaos and imposing order upon it. He was removing the emotional burden from our shoulders and replacing it with a clear, strategic path forward. Ryan was already at his laptop, building the spreadsheet of damages. I sat down with a notepad and began to write my impact statement, the words pouring out of me in a torrent of pain and sorrow. By the time the general left that afternoon, the house felt different. The despair was still there, but it was no longer all-consuming. It was now mingled with a new feeling: resolve. The next few days were a blur of activity. The cleaning crew came and went, leaving the nursery stark and empty, but clean. The contractor arrived and began the repair work. The detective in charge of the case called and informed us that they had questioned Chloe. With the video evidence, she had confessed immediately, though he noted she seemed to show no remorse, claiming I pushed her to it. He confirmed her fingerprints were a perfect match for those found on the spray paint she had discarded in our outdoor trash bin. The case against her was airtight. He also informed us that the district attorney's office had, upon review, forwarded the case to the U.S. Attorney's Office for consideration of more severe charges, citing the unusually malicious nature of the crime. The general's plan was already in motion. We followed his orders to the letter, refusing all calls from my family, which were now coming from my bewildered father as well. We were a silent, united front. The machine of justice was turning, and we were simply providing the fuel, one piece of damning evidence at a time. The legal system moved slowly, but the general had greased the wheels with the high-octane fuel of influence and meticulously prepared evidence. Less than a week after the discovery, Chloe was formally arrested. She was taken from my parents' home in handcuffs, a spectacle that finally pierced my mother's bubble of denial. The confrontation we had been bracing for was not with Chloe, but with the family that had enabled her. It came that very evening. A frantic banging on our front door startled me from the sofa. Ryan checked the doorbell camera. It was my mother and father. "Don't answer," Ryan said, his jaw tight. The general was clear. But the banging grew more desperate, accompanied by my mother's hysterical sobs. "Sabrina, please, I know you're in there. We need to talk." Against my better judgment and Ryan's advice, I couldn't bear it. I needed them to see my face, to understand the chasm that now existed between us. I opened the door. My mother looked utterly broken, her face puffy and stained with tears. My father, a man who had spent his life avoiding conflict, looked lost and helpless. "They took her," my mother cried, lunging forward to grab my arm. "They arrested her. Sabrina, you have to call them. Tell them it was a mistake, a misunderstanding. She's your sister." I pulled my arm back, my voice as cold and hard as I could make it. "It was not a misunderstanding, Mom. It was a crime. She broke into my house and she destroyed a room I built for my baby. This is not a family squabble that you can smooth over. This is out of my hands now." "What do you mean, out of your hands?" my father asked, finding his voice. "You're the one who pressed charges." "She committed a felony," Ryan interjected, stepping up beside me, a solid, immovable wall. "The state pressed charges, and soon the federal government will be pressing charges. This is what happens when actions have consequences, something Chloe has never been taught." My mother stared at us, her expression shifting from grief to indignant anger. "Her father-in-law is behind this, isn't he?" she spat, her voice dripping with venom. "That military man, pulling strings, trying to ruin my daughter's life. This is a family matter. How could you let him interfere?" "He's not interfering, he's protecting his family," I said quietly. "Something you failed to do for me when you handed my sister the key and left her alone in my house." The accusation hung in the air, undeniable. My mother flinched as if I'd slapped her. She opened her mouth to offer another excuse, another justification, but no words came out. She finally saw the truth. Her actions had directly led to this moment. She had chosen her favorite daughter, and now she was facing the consequences of that choice. I looked at both of my parents, at the family I had grown up with, and felt a profound and painful disconnect. They weren't here out of concern for me or my unborn child. They were here to manage the fallout for Chloe. "You need to leave," I said, my voice shaking slightly but firm. I closed the door on their shocked faces, the finality of the act sealing the end of our relationship as I had known it. The next confrontation was in a place far more formal, a federal courtroom for Chloe's arraignment. Ryan and I saw tea in the back with the general beside us. He was a silent, imposing figure in a dark suit. When Chloe was led in, wearing an orange jumpsuit, my breath caught. She looked small and pathetic, her influencer glamour stripped away, replaced by the stark reality of her situation. Her eyes scanned the room and widened when she saw us. I saw not remorse in her gaze, but pure, unadulterated hatred. The charges were read: destruction of property on federal interest property, a creative charge linked to Ryan's security clearance, and interstate communication of threats, based on the text she had sent me while we were out of state. Her court-appointed lawyer looked overwhelmed. The prosecutor, a sharp woman in her 40s, presented the evidence with brisk efficiency. The videos, the fingerprint reports, the itemized list of damages totaling over $15,000, and my own victim impact statement, which was read aloud to the court. As the prosecutor read my words about the love and hope I had poured into the nursery, I saw the first flicker of something other than anger on Chloe's face. It looked like shock, as if for the very first time, she was being forced to understand the magnitude of what she had done. Bail was denied. She was deemed a potential threat to me and my family. She was led away in tears, finally realizing that no one was coming to rescue her. There would be no easy way out. The system General Hayes had set in motion was methodical and relentless. A few weeks later, faced with an avalanche of evidence and the prospect of a trial that prosecutors were confident they would win, Chloe was offered a plea deal. It was far from the slap on the wrist my parents had hoped for. It involved pleading guilty to the destruction of property charge in exchange for dropping the threat charge. The recommendation from the prosecutor was a sentence of 36 months in a federal correctional facility, followed by a long period of supervised release and full financial restitution. The final confrontation came not in person, but in the form of a letter, smuggled out of the detention center by another inmate and delivered to my parents, who then left it in our mailbox. The handwriting was a childish scrawl. It was a rambling, self-pitying letter, full of accusations and blame. "I know what I did was wrong," she wrote, "but you have to understand the pressure I was under. You and your perfect life, you always made me feel so small. I'm sorry you were upset, but you never supported me. You and your husband and his scary father have ruined my life over some paint and a broken chair." I read the letter and felt nothing. No anger, no pity, just a vast, empty distance. She still didn't get it. She never would. She wasn't sorry for what she did. She was sorry she got caught. Ryan took the letter from my hands, tore it into small pieces, and dropped it in the trash. "It's over, Sabrina," he said. The plan had worked. The system had held. And now, all that was left was the aftermath. Chloe's sentencing hearing was a somber affair. We were there, me, Ryan, and the general. My parents were there as well, sitting on the opposite side of the courtroom, a visual representation of the chasm that had opened in our family. Chloe stood before the judge, pale and trembling, and formally accepted the plea agreement. When the judge asked if she had anything to say, she read a brief, stilted apology that her lawyer had clearly written for her. It was full of words like remorse and regret, but her eyes were empty, and the words felt hollow. The judge sentenced her to 36 months in a federal correctional facility for women, followed by 3 years of supervised release. She was also ordered to pay the full $15,342 in restitution. A low wail escaped my mother's lips as the sentence was handed down. Chloe was led away, and she didn't look back. I didn't feel a surge of victory or a sense of triumph. I just felt a quiet, profound relief. The storm had passed. 2 weeks later, I went into labor. After 12 hours, I gave birth to a beautiful, healthy baby boy. We named him Leo Thomas Hayes. He was perfect. He had my dark hair and Ryan's bright blue eyes. Holding him in my arms for the first time, all the pain and trauma of the past few months melted away, replaced by a love so fierce and all-encompassing it left me breathless. We brought Leo home to a house that was finally our sanctuary again. The nursery had been completely rebuilt. The general had insisted on covering all the upfront costs, a debt he told us we could repay with grandchildren. The walls were painted a soft, calming shade of blue. A new crib stood in the corner, and a new glider sat by the window. Ryan had found an artist who created a beautiful decal for the wall above the crib, a silver moon and a cascade of stars. It was different from my mural, but it was just as beautiful. It wasn't a room born of my own hands, but one built by the love of our new, chosen F. Emily, it was a testament to resilience. My relationship with my parents was shattered, perhaps irreparably. My father called a few times, his conversations stilted and awkward. He was caught between his wife's grief and his daughter's reality, and his lifelong avoidance of conflict left him paralyzed. My mother, Helen, sent a barrage of guilt-laden texts, blaming me, blaming the general, blaming everyone but Chloe for her daughter's fate. She couldn't comprehend that Chloe's choices were her own. I eventually blocked her number, unable to bear the weight of her toxic, misplaced grief. The birth of her first grandchild wasn't enough to bridge the divide. She couldn't celebrate my joy while she was mourning the consequences of Chloe's hate. In stark contrast, my bond with Ryan's family deepened into something truly profound. His mother was a doting, hands-on grandmother, always ready with a home-cooked meal or an offer to watch Leo so I could nap. The general, the formidable military man, was transformed by his grandson. He would sit for hours, holding Leo on his chest, his large, weathered hand gently patting the tiny back. He would talk to him in a low, rumbling voice, not about battles and strategy, but about baseball and fishing and the importance of being a good man. Seeing this powerful man so completely captivated by my son was a beautiful, healing sight. They were my family. They had shown up, closed ranks, and protected us when my own family had failed so spectacularly. Months turned into a year. Chloe was in a facility a few states away. According to my father, she was taking classes and working in the prison library. Maybe, just maybe, she was growing up. I didn't know, and I found that I didn't spend much time thinking about it. My life was full. It was full of Leo's laughter, of Ryan's steadfast love, of the quiet joy of building our life together. The restitution payments arrived every month like clockwork, automatically deducted from an account my parents funded and deposited directly into ours. We put every penny into a college savings account for Leo. Her hate was going to fund his future. Sometimes, late at night, when the house is quiet and I'm standing in the doorway of the nursery watching my son sleep peacefully beneath his canopy of stars, I think about everything that happened. I don't feel anger anymore, just a sad sort of pity for my sister, a woman so consumed by jealousy that she couldn't see the love that was right in front of her. I don't regret what we did. We didn't seek revenge, we simply stepped aside and allowed justice to run its course. We drew a line in the sand to protect our child, and we held that line. And in doing so, we built a new life, stronger and more beautiful than the one we had before, founded not on a shared past, but on a shared promise for the future. My son is safe. My home is peaceful, and I am finally free.